Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Abez Show with me, Abe. Today, I have someone who's super special, especially in the ecosystem in Dubai, Gary. Hey, Gary, how are you?
I was about to write up that I'm a B minus, and I think that's mirrored anyway, so it doesn't really work. Well, I am good. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's always funny. We were, for the audience's benefit, just talking. What are we going to talk about? And in kind of defined time, kind of like this is what, like 20-minute show. You can always kind of fit only so much. And this recently came up. I'm on some random panel in some conference, and it was one of these things where the whole thing is like 20 minutes and there's 5 panelists and a moderator. So kind of the joke is, great, we're just going to introduce ourselves and then walk off stage for a coffee.
Essentially, I've had some of my guests, we've recorded over an hour, and the content was so good that I had to like split it up into a couple of episodes. Again, no pressure, but the thing is it's good to have this, one-on-one interaction with people, and it's good to be on point and straight to the point. And I think a lot of, you know, yeah, I'd love to say I'm a like an entertainer like Joe Rogan, but then again, who's got 4 hours to spare, right? So sometimes, I think I was telling somebody last week, and they were asking me, "Have you seen the new Justice League movie?" And I'm like, "Dude, like I don't know if I can spare 4 hours and 10 minutes of my life. Too much commitment these days, right?" So, but anyway, Gary, please tell my audience who Gary is and what do you do.
Well, thank you. If your audience follows you from kind of show to show and podcast to podcast, this might be a little bit repetitive, but thank you for having me on this one. But hi, my name is Gary Sheynkman. Small VC firm based out here in Dubai. We invest primarily in developed market companies, both really early stage as well as some late stage secondary work on behalf of our LPs. Probably best known in Dubai for bringing Techstars out to the Middle East, which is an international accelerator for entrepreneurs, and for hosting I don't want to say prolific, infamous happy hour for founders. And we have, some 200 some people in a meme lord WhatsApp group that restricts talking any business with the implied punishment that talking business gets you instantly banned. And people love their margaritas. And I'm actually surprised just how on topic of being all the time off topic people stay for fear of being excluded from all the margarita drinking.
It's true. It's true. I know I'm a part of that group, and it's what I find really awesome about that Taco Stars group is the amount of people that post pictures of tacos from all over the world. Like I'm shooting this out of my buddy's place in Jordan, and I think I shared pictures of the taco place in Jordan as well just before, and it's I have to say you've created that community, and you've put in that lighter, a sense of humor on our day-to-day stress, because day-to-day has been really stressful these days.
Well, thank you. But one of the things that I found myself pigeonholed into is that I love Mexican food. I think it's fantastic. But sometimes I will find a venue sometime in town, and I'm like, you know what? I would love to host an event here, but it would be off-brand. So we've done some events that were kind of not taco stars at Akibadori, which is this awesome Japanese pizza place in Dubai Design District. And I love the venue. I love the food. I think the founder of, the entrepreneur that owns the place is a great guy. And I can only do so many events there because even if the venue is great and you kind of enjoy kind of the vibe there, I'm now forever in the, Mexican cuisine derivative online meme groups. So it's Taco Stars, and then there's The Fork, which is Burrito Buys, which is just the crypto people, because we had to segregate them because crypto people pollute any group that they jump into. And now there is a new one forming called the Queso Console, which is kind of more of seasoned entrepreneurs that want to take time to do like one-on-one coaching, and we're figuring out what that's going to look like. And so I'm going to run out. Like, the nice thing is that there are a lot of Mexican dishes, and you can rhyme for a while. So I think we have quite a bit of runway, but we're now firmly into just Mexican cuisine for all startup related activities that I'll do for the rest of my life. Like this is it.
Well, I have a fear that you're gonna actually start something that's like a Mexican themed startup with like I don't know, like, but let's stick to the food and let's not go into anything else. But it is very and I think I was even involved in the whole discussion with the burrito thing until they did take over the whole conversation, and then you're like, you know what, let's create a group, you know what I mean, and it was pretty good. But again, like, honestly, obviously me and you were on a million WhatsApp groups, especially in Dubai, especially in the ecosystem and stuff like that, and a lot of them are literally on mute. But this one, there's some seriously creative memes on that thing, you know what I mean, like you open it and I'm like, damn, like this is hilarious, you know what I mean? And obviously there's a lot of people who are dormant, but there's a lot, like there isn't like one person who's always on. It's like different types of people, different time of days. It's pretty cool. I think it's a good
Yeah, you gotta keep engaging with folks to keep it interesting. And I think in the US for kind of semi-professionally, affiliated groups, a lot of them live in Slack and now in Geneva. But I think two things really define, I think, Middle East kind of white collar knowledge worker culture. Um, and that you are like WhatsApp is a desktop messaging application for sharing large files and getting work done. Which is, it's not the best stat, but it's just what you use because people won't reply to email, but they'll look at your WhatsApp message. It's that, and that the average person knows way too much about VPNs than their counterpart in any normal place. Like, right, like to an American or to whatever, a Swede, a VPN is something that a developer uses to access a remote server or something their dad used to do to access their corporate email on a work laptop that still needed to be cranked or like to get powered on. Here, like the average mom that takes her kids to football practice in the van. She's like, hey, there's this, private internet access is not as good with Netflix anymore. So I got that NordVPN premium package. I get the Amazon UK. The stream is really good. I got it set up on the router. And so just the average person is just really, really in tune with just the newest things that people are offering. And those two things are what like really surprise people, I think, when they really interact with the market. It's like, hey, like you don't use email or Slack, but you're sending me presentations and legal documents over WhatsApp as if it's any kind of legitimate channel for communicating.
I remember that time where I was insecure and like everybody looked at each other and like, but I've been sending like legal signed documents and like, and then I think there was like this whole movement against it to move to I can't remember if it was a Signal or Telegram or what, and I'm like, just go back to email, like seriously, like like it's just I don't know, just the collaboration tools, obviously they're just
Yeah. The funny bit for me is that both Telegram and Signal, that you can turn it off, have this really like peak level of dark pattern annoying thing that they do where they send you a notification or they put up at the top of your inbox as someone has joined. And so imagine, it's like 300 or 400 people off of your contact list are joining these apps. They're basically exploding at the seams. They're useless now because you can't even find any of the conversations that you've had before. And then this happens, and obviously no one uses them. Like actually, I haven't seen any person really migrate. And so you have to go and archive all of these groups just to get to like the 3 groups that I use on Signal and the 2 groups that I have on Telegram. And I had to go and refine them and like surface them and message them so they're on top so that I could multiple swipe out. It was just a horrible experience. I hope to never live through a WhatsApp privacy crisis ever again.
I bet you, like, I know there was something in their terms of service that changed and stuff like that, but I think it was like some guy or person that said, you know what, I don't like this WhatsApp. Let me try to move all of my friends, and I think it just created like an echo, right? And then like literally a month later, or not even a month, 2 weeks later, we're back on WhatsApp. Everything's back on like please, like you're destroying us, right? So, but yeah, so let's get back to I know we ranted about taco stars and talked about WhatsApp and stuff. Let's talk about your stories with founders and like stuff that you want to share with some of the audience.
Oh man, I don't know. I think that every success or every one doing cool shit, it doesn't matter if it's successful or not. Once you are doing things that are interesting career wise, whether it's earlier or later than in life, it is not as complicated to build a backwards looking narrative that makes sense of how you ended up there. And I think, that's why you have like all of these awesome stories. It's like, oh, you had this thing happen and then you did this thing and then you failed this company and then you met these people and all of this kind of worked itself out. But when you're in the middle of it, you're kind of falling kind of backwards through the events in your life and they're stressful, right? So for every large scale event or successful financial exits, there is days of dumping in your pants. Let's keep this PG-13 right before it happens. Will will an acquisition happen? Will people show up to the event? Will companies apply to you to a program? It doesn't really, you're someone that's run entrepreneurial quote unquote ecosystem, but generally programming for founders. You've done investing as well. There is a moment that in any business you put yourself out there, and no matter how confident you are and no matter how good you might or might not be, there is that moment when you're hosting the party and you're showing up and you're there with the welcome balloon, or you're there at the airport hoping the person gets off the plane and you kind of don't know if they're coming or not. And so I don't think that changes. I think that anytime, even public speaking, like no matter how many times you do it, you kind of feel a little queasy coming out with the lights and people are giving the nod into what you're saying. You're like, I hope this makes sense because I don't know what's happening right now.
No, you know what, 100%. And I remember one of our demo days for Startup Bootcamp. It rained on the same day, and you know what happens, like especially in the Middle East, if it rains, people are just. And I think we had something like we invited like 800 people, and we had something like 350 confirmation. Less than 100 people showed up because it rained. People are like, "Where am I gonna park?" Blah blah blah, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Just come to the." And the whole event was like, like an hour and a half. Like it wasn't that, and it was a big deal. It was I remember it was a really nice demo day too. But like more people, I think, showed up to your Taco Stars night gathering than that demo day. But again, like I do agree with you. There's a lot of things in the ecosystem. As much as as big as your network is, sometimes people get fatigued from certain topics. People applying to programs. Some people, stopped applying to programs. I know you get hundreds. Like our last program got 1,300 applications, but still, like people are like I think they're looking for something new as well, and that's what we play a big part in shaping up the ecosystem and defining what's the next step, or outlining what needs to be done, because there is that checks and balances that I think we hold a lot of our corporate partners accountable for. So I think that's something that both Techstars and Startup Bootcamp did well in UAE. So yeah, but tell me, like, the funniest founder story that you had. Like basic aha moments, but oops moments like as well. I don't. Can you recall anything on top of your head?
I would say it's never moments that are very funny that you remember. It's moments that are part of, I don't know, the theater of the absurd. And so it's we had a company, our first program was in 2018, and they called Natufia, and they have this thing that kind of looks like a refrigerator, but it's an indoor, these kind of Nescafe like grow pods. And so you can grow fresh basil or mint right in your kitchen. It's like this, beautiful luxury appliance. The company is from Estonia. And so, got into the program and they shipped, prototype, and lo and behold, gets stuck in customs. And so now we're in this limbo of there's no classification for an indoor kind of growing device. It's a prototype, so we kind of need it to show off to folks. And so imagine, me running around, Dubai and kind of Emirates Towers up and back, trying to get as many WASTA letters from as many departments that could possibly okay this, to just come with like a packet to customs and say, hey, all of these people say it's okay. That kind of stuff. Or, we've had situations where, a company does something that's theoretically regulated by multiple entities. And so both require a non-objection certificate, which is, for those who are not local, it's something that a regulator of a specific industry will issue, that they don't mind you conducting an activity that theoretically they're regulating, but might not have a specific, whether it's volume or specifications around it. And so a lot of this is advertising or, dealing with people's money and things like that. And so if you need a whole bunch of non-objection certificates, if they're overlapping businesses because you're a startup and you're like, oh, actually, it makes sense to do a moving piece of advertising. And so that's actually the roads, and it's the media console, and it's the municipality. But it's always the first time that you run into these experiences that you're like, oh, I guess we have to go and figure, this process out. And are we the first people to try to do this? I don't know. Let's go and do that. So I think it's funny because it's absurd. It's frustrating when you are in it, and then you get to laugh at it afterwards. I think those are the stories that you end up kind of telling over drinks, that you remember most fondly. But they end up being as egg on face, with some large organization, usually because they're doing something silly or something nonsensical. I have a workshop that I do. I call it Fundraising 102, which are just these super practical pieces of advice. And I think one of the last slides, I say, hey, when all else fails, your deck design and your bottoms up models and, these email intros and blah, 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 blah. You should just feed people, because this is one of the reasons that I do, social nights, is people associate, dopamine release with the activity that they're doing. So if it's you with them and they're having a good time, you'll get it solved. I've fixed term sheet issues over a bottle many a times, and it just costs you whatever, a couple of years of life expectancy and probably permanent liver damage. But at the end of the day, that's sometimes what it takes in business. We are ultimately social creatures, and we care to move forward more than dig in, as long as everyone is reasonably happy and in a good mood. Never negotiate hungry. Never negotiate when the other person is hungry. Let's put it this way: you can be hungry, but the other person should be recently fed.
You know what? Honestly, that is a good advice, and I actually did learn this years and years ago, because people tend to let the little things slide over a meal. Especially over email, you want to document everything, and you put every little thing. But we're on a table, and they're like, "Can we adjust this clause?" I'd be like, "You know what? Yeah, we can talk about it." You know what I mean? Like it's smooth. It's so much smoother. So okay, that was great advice. What other great advice would you like to give some of the people listening as well?
Depending on where they are on kind of on the spectrum of founder, investor, generally interested in business, one of the things that I am struggling with is a lesson that I frequently heard, but then when it happened to me the first time around, I've been having difficulty digesting the lesson, and that it's sometimes things don't work out ethically with people, and at least in early stage, it's more expensive on your time and your capital to pursue a legal outcome, even out of spite, than the original investment. It's something that you have to learn how to do, because it sucks when it happens to you. And so your first reaction is, oh, I have all of this recourse and all of these resources available. And then you're realizing all of that all of those resources could be better put to invest into people that you actually want to be spending time with and leveraging on their success as an investor.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And you know what? That's I think that's something I talked about many times on the show and many times in my programs. Is people always neglect, especially startups, neglect the legal framework and neglect all kind of accounting and finance. They say, we'll build it and then we'll find a way how to sell it and then we'll register it or we'll go through the IP or whatever, right? I said one of the years, one of my best friends was a lawyer, right? So because I'd call them usually on a daily basis saying, okay, this is what's happening now. And then we honestly started like hanging out, that's a, obviously he was paying me for it, but it was not man, but there was lot of gaps that I never thought they were that important, but it's very, very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, also, I think as an industry, we have a lot of these concepts that have been around for a long time, and sometimes they've been around for a long time because someone had an idea and implemented it for whatever reason, and it just doesn't hold. And so, our fund is a rolling fund; it's quarterly contributions, and so we don't do parallel structures. Hey, venture capital has been doing the same stuff for like 50 something plus years with the exact same legal model. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense in kind of what we have today in terms of available liquidity, in terms of pace to deal flow, in terms of the technology that we have to manage these legal structures. That one is, I think, is going to go away, and we'll see firms that are offering multiple kind of products as opposed to just fund. Because look, if you go to a bank, the bank will sell you fixed income, they'll sell you REITs, they'll sell you 50, 60 different products. While venture capital really only sells you one, and then accelerators sell you like one or two, and then studios is another one. And so we have very few products from a financial standpoint and from an exposure standpoint in the venture world. And I think that's going to change. But also that means that kind of the way that those legal models reach into the companies we fund will change as well. We just made an investment in a company in the US, and one of the things that they wanted to implement as both experienced entrepreneurs was no vesting periods. They have a vesting period, but they don't have a vesting cliff. So great, we're doing a full-on 4-year vesting, wonderful, but no 1-year cliff, because that always creates a situation where you hire someone, they're great, and maybe in 6-7 months there's a pivot, or maybe they're out of their depth. And so now you have this perverse situation where either you're punishing the person for leaving early, despite the fact that they've come into the organization with really good faith, or you're punishing the company by having a person stay out until they hit their cliff, being miserable and unproductive for an extra 3-4 months. Wouldn't it just be easier to go and break? But we have this concept, again, probably from the 80s, that, hey, if you don't put in the year, it doesn't count like you've done anything. And look, a year in startup years, the startups are like dogs, right? It's like, what, 7 years is a single year. I mean, you can accomplish so much. And so I think it's just a much healthier way of looking at stuff. And it takes kind of both investors and entrepreneurs to come together and say, hey, actually, we've all been doing this as a standard thing for a long time, but we don't have to. Nothing is really preventing us from changing this and making decisions that are going to be hopefully better for everyone in the long term.
I agree 100%. And honestly, I've never heard of that concept with no cliff, but just hearing you say it makes a lot of sense. Because, it's like it's exactly what you said. The 80s people used to do that one last quarter just to make sure that they get that bonus, and then they're out, right? It's like that magic pill or whatever you want to call it, right? So
Golden handcuffs.
The golden handcuffs. That's the word, actually. Okay, so we're at a time of the show where I ask every one of my guests the same question. If you had a superpower, what would that be? Or if you want to mimic a superhero, who would that be?
Oh no, it's the Flash. It's always been my favorite superhero. I mean, I just think it's first of all, you're the fastest metal act, so you get to just run around the world and do cool stuff. But also, the expansive powers of time travel, phasing through objects, But also, like, he's a huge nerd, and so the idea of getting smart on something is hugely relevant to our professions. And I'm a travel bug, and the idea of running for a croissant to Paris and back, kind of sounds good. And by the way, I'm a fan of the CW TV show Flash, not the Zack Snyder Justice League with like the weird arm plates Flash. Like, give me like the OG. Barry Allen is a forensic, police cop guy, that's super nerdy. Yeah, like I want the whole thing. Like that's my guy.
100% agreed. Didn't like the Justice League Ezra character. You got to go with Barry Allen. He's a legend. In closing, would you like to tell any of my audience anything?
Well, for those of you in Dubai, enjoy the last few days of beach weather. Hopefully see you in September. And so, enjoy your summer break, and do come back for the next season of Dubai.
In all fairness, this episode will air in October, but we'll see what happens about that. So you should
all right then.
go to the beach.
No, welcome back. It is rooftop weather. It is conference season. We're not wearing masks. This is so exciting, everyone. We're so glad to have you.
Well, thank you very much, Gary, for coming on. By the way, everybody, we do have a hashtag called Real Talk No Nonsense. And until next time, take care.
Is no nonsense accurate? I mean, there was a little bit of nonsense. I mean, it is real talk, full nonsense. I think they should make an adjustment.
Maybe we'll say real talk. Let's talk tacos or something. We'll see what happens from